Hey folks, thanks for joining me for this episode from the Embellish Pod. If you got here by chance, please take a moment to hit the subscribe button. Hopefully I can be found on any podcasting platform that exists. And if you can't find me on a platform, send me an email at embellishpod@gmail.com and I'll try to get that taken care of. You can also find video versions of this podcast on YouTube. You can find all of my links on Instagram at embellishpod or TikTok with the same handle. I have a website. It is www.embellishpod.com. It's a place to pick up these episode details and more. Today I have Denny and Jane joining me from Potter Jane Distillery, and I hope you guys enjoy this conversation because I did. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whenever you happen to be consuming this particular podcast. I have the folks from Potter Jane Distilling joining me, and I got a wonderful opportunity to chit-chat with y'all at the Kentucky Bourbon Festival. I'll be honest, one of the best things I drank the entire time I was there were the little ponies of beer. Man, it was a perfect day for a nice cold beer on a nice sunny warm day and a really nice respite from drinking whiskey. But I also got an opportunity to taste some of your really short aged spirits, which were really impressive. But I'll give you guys a chance to sort of introduce yourselves. Most of the folks that listen to this are gonna know who you are, but kind of what you guys are doing with Potter Jane.
Sure, go ahead.
No, you go.
So yeah, Denny Potter. I'll be in the industry 28 years in January. Have worked mainly for two companies before we left to do this. One was Heaven Hill, which I was at for about 6.5 years, and was VP of Ops and Master Distiller there. And then all the iterations of Suntory Spirits, which is what it's called now. But worked at a few of the Jim Beam plants, Maker's Mark, and then also ran Cruisin' Rum down in the Caribbean for 3 years.
Jane Bowie.
You didn't think it would take me that I would be that fast, did you?
I started in the industry in 2007. I spent my entire career pre-Potter Jane at Maker's Mark, doing a lot of different jobs. My career path looks like a plate of spaghetti. But when Denny and I left in 2022, I was head of blending, innovation, and maturation at Maker's Mark.
And I've been, I'm from Kentucky, right? We grew up on Maker's Mark. It was kind of whenever I was a college kid, it was the splurge whiskey, and this was in the late 90s, so that was kind of the thing. And I've been following the whiskey drop since its inception. And that was sort of the first time that I got to know, both of you a little bit through what you produce and the fact that you guys did the, master distiller versus master of maturation bottles. And maybe this is a weird question or not. Have you guys ever sat down and decided which one was better between the two? Because I know the rest of us did. The rest of us folks sat down and were like, okay, which one do we think is better? And that's an individual thing. Is that a thing that you guys have done?
Well, I mean,
they were.
We each developed the wood finishing that we preferred to make each liquid. So yeah,
yours would have been sweet and cheerful, and mine would have been like bold and in your face,
dark. And, yeah.
Yeah. So
which one did you like?
Dark and confrontational.
I may have liked the dark and confrontational a little bit better. That may be more towards my flavor profile specifically. And we won't spend much time talking about, we want to talk about what you guys are working on now. You're 9 months into production, I think, on Potter Jane. Is that right? Or are we farther along?
7.
7 months.
Yeah.
So we're 7 months into production. What does, and not the Instagram version, because I do follow you guys on social media and I really enjoyed the skipping video, because I don't know that I could skip as an adult anymore. So bravo to y'all. But what does a typical day of work look like that's not that? Or is that exactly what it actually looks like?
Oh man.
All the above.
Yeah. I mean, it's different every day, but it's not, I guess you could say. I mean, first off, I think we were incredibly lucky to hire the team that we have. A year ago, we were just starting to assemble the team, and there was a lot of like anxiety around, who are we going to be able to bring on board, and like how free would we be to go do other things? Because now as owners, we're doing things that we never had to do before. Running a it's a small business, but it's a business that involves a lot of money. And so it's awesome to have the team we have, because our day to day, like they don't need us here. That 1,000,000%.
If anything, we just get in the way
Yeah.
and distract them.
So, I mean, really it's, coming in, and one of the first things that I do, and usually Jane does, sometimes we ride together, sometimes we ride separate, is go taste the distillate right off the still. I mean, always excited to get in and try it, see how it's doing. Walk, we're all open top fermentation, so we can quickly walk through and check out how fermentation is going. And then, after that, it's kind of just talking with the team and, looking at our production schedule and making sure, we're doing what we've planned to do, and really listening to them. And if they have any issues or roadblocks that we can help get out of their way so they can go do their jobs, then that's kind of what we do, really.
It's been a adjustment, I think, as you move through any career, not just these careers. I think as you move up, it's less of the day-to-day computer. Like now we don't feel like we necessarily accomplish things, and I just gave air quotes. But part of the job is we sit around and talk all the time to each other about the future, about brand, about what's happening in the industry, about strategy, about, being so small, we're agile. We've got a great education on how to be, we think, great in this industry. So a lot of our time, it doesn't feel like work. We've had to change our mindset on like us sitting around talking to each other is now the job. So
yeah,
it is a lot of it.
And I do all of our bills too, so there's always bills to pay.
I don't do any of that.
Always bills to pay.
So you both come from, a large corporate background. And as you kind of start off in a startup situation, you mentioned agile, you've been building your team, hiring folks. Are there some lessons that you took from how, large corporations could take a long time to kind of build your team, whereas smaller corporations or startups can do it really, really, really fast? Were there some lessons that you took from previous employment that helps you build out kind of the fantasy team that you want to have? Or was it just, copy and paste from what you used to do?
Yeah, I think there were lessons. I think one of the big things I learned, and then we both have managed large teams, dynamic teams. You can go faster or small, but it's a lot more painful to get rid of the wrong person than it is to wait for the right person. So, I think we're both big believers on if you hire good people, like the rest kind of works itself out a lot of the time. I'm nervous to say this, but like it was almost too easy putting this team together in some ways. We got really, really lucky. And I think part of that is Denny's background and reputation on being a GM, running operations. Like people wanted to come work and learn from him. So we got some really great talent through the door.
Yeah, and I think, we've got people that have really good industry experience. And I think there was an excitement, too, about a startup run by two people that aren't, new to the industry. We've been a part of it for a long time. I think our reputations are halfway decent. And we've hired, a lot of people that are from Washington County, which is where our distillery is based, which they have not had a distillery here since pre-Prohibition. So there was a lot of community excitement about when we were going to post jobs and things like that. So we did not poach anybody. That was really important. We did not, we're friends with places, we've worked at before or other people in the industry. But we also, if we had good people that applied, we weren't going to turn them down because they did work for somebody else. We just wanted to make sure that we weren't poaching anybody. So like Jane said, we kind of had in our head what would be an unbelievable team, and we pretty much built the exact team. Like we
would do like a fake lottery pick, like draft. We would chat before we posted every job. and we would have like, if we could handpick anybody for this job, like who would it be? And we got a lot of those lottery picks.
We were about 90%.
Yeah. So, that was fun. And it's there is a lot of stress. So having, to Denny's point, people that don't need us, other than just to support and do what we say we're going to do every day, like that's such a load off on getting this business started and thinking about, because making the whiskey's the easy part, selling it's the hard part.
But even the hiring process, when you're comparing to kind of how we've had to do it before, it's very quick. Like we would always do one of the interviews with a candidate at my house. So whether it's on my back porch, we would have a cocktail, we would just sit there and talk, and literally however that went, and it always went well, they would have a job offered before they got home. So very easy. We use a third-party HR group out of Louisville, HR affiliates. So they've been partnered with us almost from day one, and they just so easy to say, okay, we've got this person. Here's what we want to pay them. We need to set them up with benefits. We need to get an offer letter written up, and then boom, it's done. Almost immediately.
And that interview was more about them making sure they wanted to work with us, because we're not everybody's cup of tea. Like, we're very aware of that. So it's either people are going to love it here, or they're going to go, these guys are morons. I want no part of this. So
yeah. We wanted to get them out of their comfort zone, because a lot of them are used to a bit of a corporate environment too. So it was kind of seeing how they would react.
Yeah. And, I would say if you're looking at like a 90% success rate on your sort of, imaginary fantasy draft here, there's really no question on whether you have a decent reputation or not, right? Because folks are going to sit on your front porch and do an interview, which can be a daunting thing to begin with. But, having a 90% success rate coming out of the other side of that is really, really impressive. And I've been a part of startups in the past, and having those front porch interviews can be unnerving because it is out of the norm. When you're trying to build something like I think you guys are trying to build, it makes a ton of sense. And so maybe we'll shift a little bit to, you both have incredible career backgrounds where you could have stayed inside of large machines for the rest of your life and had really, really fantastic careers. What put you in a position where you said, you know what, we're going to step out and do our own thing, as opposed to kind of, moving from one distiller to another, over a period of time?
I don't know, that the way you described that security blanket sounded pretty good for a minute.
Yeah, we still might end back up there.
Right.
No, I know how I like to answer this.
You go ahead. I'll add color comment.
I think for us, and there's no question, man. Jane and I had incredible jobs at Makers. You've been to Makers. There isn't a job in the world that's as good as the day-to-day at Maker's Mark. There just is. Beautiful campus, unbelievable people, great liquid. It's just incredible.
World-class art.
Yeah, world-class art, yeah. I think, when you're in this industry as long as we have been, you see like how important the generational aspect is. And, these distilleries are not in big towns, most of them, right? They're in small towns. So they're these generational operations that have, families that literally have new family members that step in for the next generation and work these jobs. But, like for me, for example, right? Start out at Jim Beam Claremont. You've got Booker still involved, and you've got Fred. And then, Freddie's going to come in a little bit later. Then at Makers, you have the Samuels. When I was at Cruise and Rum, I had the Nelthrops. Then you have the Shapiras and the Beams at Heaven Hill. So, and then, Jane and I, a big part of our job, wasn't just operations, but it was the marketing side too. So going out telling these stories, right? Like how Makers was founded, or how some of these others were founded, and how, these family members have stayed on board and continue to run. And I think you get an idea in your head that how cool would that be if we could do the same thing? And you have to start somewhere. Right? You got to start generation one at some point if you're going to do this. And I think that really was more the motivation of great jobs, unbelievable, loved every second of it. But if we wanted to do something that was more generational, we couldn't do that telling their story.
Mhm.
We had to figure out a way to build our own story, which is what we're doing. And I think that was kind of a lot of the motivation to go do this.
I think we both had different reasons and different ideas. I also think the people that I don't know, I can still remember my first week in March of '07 and like having never really had much to do with the industry. I grew up in a dry town in Kentucky. Like I just was in love from day one. Like I don't know what I'm going to do in this industry, but I know this is the only industry I ever want to work in. And I think a lot of people feel that way, that just get into it and there's just something about it. It's the history, it is the agriculture, it's the liquid, it's the people. It's just, so I think it was a bit of the generational. And then I think for me as well, it was just, I love the liquid. I love everything about, we take these raw materials and we turn them into something else, and how you can influence the flavor, how you can decide what goes in that bottle. And I think it was a little bit of that as well. And not that we didn't have freedom at these places, we did,
Mhm.
right? Like I got to do some amazing projects in my tenure at Makers on creating liquid, but it wasn't the same as like truly getting to make every decision on and putting your money where your mouth was on some stuff. We've had to do a lot of that in these first 3 years. So I think it was a little bit of all of it, of
Yeah.
just, if we're going to stay in this industry, why not try? We're old enough to have had careers, but we're still young enough to have the energy to go do this.
You know, and the story of bourbon in the state of Kentucky is already incredibly romantic, right? And then you add in these, you know, generational distilleries and the familial environment, right? This is an agricultural product, but it kind of goes beyond that. You don't find a ton of people talking about just straight yellow dent number 2 corn like this anywhere else. But if you turn it into whiskey, then it becomes this whole other thing. You know, and I wonder, you know, you guys were a part of some places with some incredible stories, and you want to write your own kind of version of that. How does the Potter Jane version of this story, and I don't want to say, you know, diverge from it or become different than it, but what is the unique version of it that is y'all's story?
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't know. I mean, I think we're trying to figure it out. I think the fact that we weren't born into the industry, and we've kind of worked our asses off to get to where we are and to get to this point. And I think I don't know that we've ever looked at it as it being our story as it's more about the distillery and the community. Because we didn't even want to name the distillery. We did not want to use our own names. Like that was the hardest thing we've had to do to date is come up with the name. And had not every name been taken, we couldn't get anything cleared through our IP attorney, then we wouldn't have used our name. So, but I think like our story will be told through the liquid. You know, I think that we're kind of, I don't know, you tell it best. We're kind of going back in time with how whiskey used to be made primarily. And we're not talking 100 years ago. We're talking 20, right? And just really kind of letting the liquid lead. We want to make really, really, really good whiskey. And that is the overarching goal. And I think so far we are doing that. You got to get each phase right. You know, as we were telling some people Saturday, like, you know, you can make good distillate great through maturation, but you can never make bad distillate good through maturation. So we feel like we're getting that first phase right now.
I think it's a few things. I think Denny's right. It's interesting because when we started talking about this, our number one thing was we want to own this distillery. Like, if we're going to leave these great jobs in a company and a parent company through Suntory that we really love, this wasn't like I got to get out of here, this job sucks, right? Like, it was more, we want to go try this, right? And it's, how do two people who grew up extremely middle class, my mom was a teacher, Denny's dad, like, ran, like, ended up owning a business, but started from, how do two ship munchers own a $50 million business, right? I mean, makers pay well, but they didn't pay that well. So, finding the bank. And I think it's interesting. We're coming from the industry, but to Jenny's point, we weren't born into it. We're just these expats that fell in love with it. But I think it's a couple of things for us, because when we really got serious about this, meaning there was money on the table, we were going to go sign our houses and lives away to the bank. We sat down and had a real talk with each other. We'd been at Liquor Barn that day and had been talking to Brad Williams. He's like, we have 997 SKUs of American whiskey on the shelf. And we thought, well, fuck, what do we, like, if we don't have a real point of view, the last thing this industry needs is another brand sitting there collecting dust that isn't solving anything or bringing anything new or furthering the industry, right? Mm-hmm. And I think for us, we're consumers first, which is worrisome at times probably, but like we love to drink bourbon. Like we are consumers. And so one of the things, to Denny's point, we've seen in the last 20 years with the popularity and this meteor, like bourbon has just been on a rocket ship, is the big guys have had to go faster because demand has been so high. And then this craft movement came in. Think about, there were no craft distilleries in Kentucky 20 years ago, right? And now there's 95 distilleries in Kentucky, and the craft guys are wonderful and weird. And the heritage distilleries are just doing what they do. And we kind of looked around and said, nobody's really making the bourbon that reminds us of why we fell in love with bourbon to begin with. And if we feel that way, maybe other consumers feel that way too. So that was really, I think, the jumping off point of confidence of like, we actually do have a point of view. But to Denny's point, we're not really doing anything new. We will. The innovation will come, but the first decade is all about fundamentals, right? We have a saying, we got to earn our weird a little bit. So we really got to hone in. We got to make great whiskey. And then once the fundamentals are down and we understand the DNA and the province of Potter Jane, then we can start doing wonderfully weird things. So I don't know if that answers as far as like the legacy, but I think if you want to understand our reason and our belief system, like that was it.
Yeah, I think it covers your ethos pretty well, right? You're talking about owning home base first, making sure that you're not trying to do 500 different things at once, especially in a market where it is like this. You have to make sure your fundamentals are sound and you kind of move forward. And I wonder, because through the course of that, you mentioned the initial investment, right? And if I go back and I look at, specifically for you, Jane, there's been some conversations in the past that you've had where you've kind of been open about feeling like you have imposter syndrome. And I wonder, now that we're 7 months into producing product, but you were able to acquire, $50 million worth of capital to be able to start a business, build the team that you want, is the imposter syndrome voice getting louder, or is it getting quieter as you kind of move through the stages of building this brand?
It just moves to a different area. Like it feeds on a different, I do think we had all these liquid philosophies, and, we've sold this team that on these really, pretty strong belief systems on how bourbon should be made. And then that first day we ran the still, I remember we rode over together and it was, what if we're full of shit? Like, what if this doesn't taste good? What if we actually have no idea what we're doing? And then it came off the still and you thought, oh, thank God, it's good. And then you go into the barrel and you're like, whoa, my gosh, what if, I literally would have put my life on this size rick house and this style and these philosophies, and what if we're full of shit? And then you taste the 3 month and you're like, oh, okay. So now it's just moving into, what do we know about building a brand, or what do we like? It just, no, for me, it never quite, like it never is quiet.
Yeah. Yeah. It's never quiet. Like there's always there's always something else that we need to be focused on. And because it's, mainly the two of us, and like, like Jane said, when you own this, it's awesome, but it's also, like she said, like our houses are tied to this, our vehicles, our retirement, like everything is tied to this. So there's this constant, but it provides drive and motivation too. Like, not that we need it, but fear's good. Fear is good. It also makes us like, we're like laser focused on what we need to be doing, how we spend money. There is no taking money out of this. This is such a cash intensive industry and business that if you're not putting every penny right back into it, it's going to catch up to you at some point. So yeah, I think it makes it better, but I mean, I don't know that I'll ever sleep well ever again. But that's all right, because there's a lot of good that comes with that too, right? Like, there's a ton of satisfaction. You have these moments of, it's like, holy crap, we've done this. You quickly move on from it. But you do have, that brief period where you're like, man, we're doing this. We've done it. Like, who would have thought we could pull this off?
Bourbon Festival was one of those moments.
Yeah, that was a big one. Yeah.
Because I think when you are tied to these world-class brands and families and distilleries, like, who are you without that, right? Like, I did have a lot of fear because I had only worked one place. And Makers is one of those brands. It's so easy to love. It's easy to tell the story. There's layers upon layers of stories, and all the bullshit's real, right? So there was this fear of like, am I any good outside of that? And so I think Bourbon Festival was one of those, like, we don't have the fancy big booth and the money, and we're not, like, some people maybe know who we are, but not really. And does this resonate if you take all of the pedigree away? And it did. And that was surprising to us, I think, in a lot of ways of like, as far as a brand, I mean, we do look and feel different. One of the things we talk a lot about, the liquid side's pretty easy. The brand side, when I started drinking bourbon, John, around the same time as you, like, I was in college, late 90s, early 2000s. Obviously, we both waited till we were 21 to start drinking Old Crow out of brown paper bags. That might have just been me. But, I think when I started drinking bourbon, we always laugh. Bourbon was like Scotch's drunk and rowdy cousin, right? And over the last decade or so, bourbon's gotten a little more serious and a little more refined. And I love that, but I kind of miss the drunk and rowdy cousin as well. So we're, as a brand, like, the whiskey's going to be as well made as possible, but the brand's going to be fun. Like, we kind of miss bourbon being a little more rowdy and fun.
And I think you nailed it on the head, right? Because there are different booths at the Bourbon Festivals, right? So that's where I got to interact with you guys. And all of them had sort of different vibes. And some of them, the vibe was a volume game, and they were just pumping out samples and, kind of churning through people with long lines. And what I noticed around y'all's booth is there was more of a communal environment where people were just sort of floating around having conversations. It felt very much like when we do football homecoming here at the university in town, we have Tent City, the day of the football game, where everybody just kind of mingles around during tents, or it's like a pre-football or pregame at a UK football game where everybody mingles from tent to tent to tent, and they just sort of talk. That's what your tent sort of felt like. It felt like you weren't taking whiskey as seriously. You're taking the quality of whiskey seriously, but we're not kind of being really precious. We're not pinkies out in this particular situation, which was really, really, really refreshing. Because I agree with you. I think that as a middle-aged white man with a beard and a whiskey podcast, like we all do, who is taking it too seriously, we are taking it way too serious, right? Because most people just want to have fun.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a bad thing, I mean, there's a reason. That's a big reason why, bourbon has been on this huge meteoric rise. But yeah, it's fun. I mean, I think you're seeing it in heart. What social media does exist for us is pretty ridiculous, and it will continue to be ridiculous. But it's just us being stupid and having fun. Like we just think, oh, this would be hilarious.
You
if we
should see
did
what
this.
we don't post.
Oh yeah, I've got a list of things that, yeah. But yeah, I mean, it's kind of a direct reflection of who we are. None of that is really made up, and our whole team is like that. It's so funny because you ask them, I'm like, hey, would you all want to jump in and do some of this? And they're, oh my god, they're all over it. They're hilarious
For the most part.
For the most part, yeah. For the most, we would never make anybody do something they didn't want to do, but yeah.
And I imagine, there are brands that have kind of started off out there with the intent to sell, and they take themselves more seriously in social media because they're trying to project an image. So you have some, venture capitalists or investors that come in and want to buy you for a few $100 million. I know that's not your kind of stated future, but most of the time everyone has a price. Do you guys have a price? Like, could you be bought out of this 10, 15, 20 years down the road? Because I think about, Pat Heist and Wilderness Trail and what they had going on. I don't think they ever intended to sell, but if somebody shows up with $500 million, it's really tough to say no to that, right?
I definitely probably would say no to it right
now. Do you know somebody, John?
No, so it's so funny. We had to have this conversation before we ever started the business. Like,
yeah, when you draw up an operating agreement together, it gets a little.
It's you go ahead and plan the divorce before you get married. So we had to do all of that, and we had to have really, especially when we started talking about this. This was before Pat and Shane. Like they sold not long after.
Yeah, Pat and Shane were a reason why we went and did this. They're good friends of ours. They were one of the first conversations we had when we were thinking about it. So, and this wasn't even, it was a year and a half later before they actually sold.
Pat's exact words were, "Only red flag I see is you ain't done it yet." So, I think we don't have necessarily a price. The goal is not to go make a bajillion dollars. We're kind of saddos that this is the hobby. We don't have hobbies like this. That's our whole lives are kind of here. When people always ask, what's the goal? The goal is for the grandkids to fucking burn it to the ground. Like, let that third generation screw it all up. That said, I don't know. Like, it would take a lot. Like, money's not necessarily what gets us out of bed every morning.
No, I mean, if we can ever get to the point where we're making what we were making at Maker's Mark,
it's a win.
That would be a win, and it would be fine. Yeah, we wish things were a little more comfortable right now. We're in pretty good shape, but it is hard. I mean, it's hard as an owner. Because we do put every penny back into the business. So,
and most of it's
everything
dead.
you spend, like if we're paying ourselves a salary, it's like, well, shit, that should be going back to the business. Right. So, yeah, I don't know that there's really a number. I'm sure it would be more situational. This is our name, right? As much as we didn't want to name it after ourselves, I think it's really good that that's where we ended up. And I just can't imagine doing anything else. And then once we have a brand out there and we're promoting that, and then you got another source of revenue coming in, I mean, I think then it just, then things just kind of freeze up, eases up a little bit. But
yeah, it's a decade of just eating glass.
Yeah. But the days of, somebody offering up $600 million for a distillery and a brand they're over. Like that's not. God love those guys, man. Like they are awesome too. The smartest people in the industry, right? Whether it's on the science side or whether it's on the business side, those guys are super smart. They're good guys, and you'll never see that again.
Yeah, I've had the privilege of sitting in the same room as Dr. Heist a number of times, and it's never any question in my mind who the smartest person in that room is, without a doubt. And it's, if you walked into the room and you didn't know who was in there and you were picking out, you probably don't pick him out right off the bat, right? Because he doesn't fit that quintessential doctor vibe that a lot of folks have. But you're exactly right. Now, Denny, this question is going to be more for you. In the past, you've called yourself an introvert who really loves details and numbers. But you've decided to start and run a distillery that's going to be relationship building and public facing work and having conversations. Like, why do you hate yourself? Why would you do that to yourself?
I think it's just loving the industry, right? Like, um, people are very surprised, honestly, when they hear me say that I'm an introvert, but I'm an extreme introvert, believe it or not. Uh, but not necessarily in the industry, right? Like it's easy to talk about what we do and how we do it and why we do it because, I think it's true. It's heartfelt. It's how we feel about things. But I think there's also that it's also good for our business. Like those are things we know we need to do. Right. Um, and I think there's also the piece of, I don't really think about all the public facing stuff. I think more about like the day-to-day operations and all the joy that comes from that. From just like you said, taking number 2 yellow and converting it into this beautiful brown liquid that everybody likes. Like there's a lot of enjoyment that comes from that. There's a lot of all the things that I enjoy, the detail, the numbers, all of that come from that. I think the public facing stuff and the extroversion that's needed for that, it just happens because you need to do it. But yeah, I'll be honest with you. I mean, I'm really not looking forward to all of that, but I also know how necessary it is. I like doing some shit. Now, don't give me that
You like
look.
drinking and talking to people.
I like
think
drinking.
You're fine.
I like drinking. There are certain places I love to go to. I like some travel. But I do think it's different. But plus, been doing it for a long time and, telling other people's stories as well. So this will be even easier, I think. But yeah, we know it's going to be boots on the ground for us. That's what makes brands successful. You're out there, you're public facing, you're telling the story, you're having the conversations, you're building relationships. And if that's going to help build this generational operation, then that's exactly what we'll do.
I think we probably do need to shift a little bit and talk a little bit about the liquid, right? Because we've talked about the brand building, and I know that you guys are looking for some older age statements whenever you finally do kind of put a product in the marketplace. But I guess you've been in production for 7 months, which means you probably have something that has been in a barrel for 7 months. And you've already mentioned that you're tasting it and you're like, okay, this is actually going okay. Is there anything surprising that's happening, aside from the fact that you're like, oh, this is really, really good? Are you hitting where you thought you were going to be at 7 months? Are you, kind of ahead of that? Are you behind that? Or, did you even have any thoughts along that line?
I think it's probably better than we expected. One of the things, if you want to get like in the weeds on, I guess, taste details, one of the things we really wanted to do was slow down fermentation and pull some of the overly heavy grain characteristics out of the distillate. So things like high gravity, shorter fermentation, enzyme usage, like these are things that have been kind of new age bourbon. And we wanted to kind of pull all of that back and not do any of those things. And so, when you think about tasting anything 2 years or under, it's typically sickly sweet, a lot of corn, some aggressive tannins, right? Well, because our distillate doesn't have a lot of grain characteristics to start with, because it's really more fruit forward, you get grain essence, but it's not like a mouthful of candy corn. You're not getting that in the mature stuff. So our oldest barrel turns 7 months tomorrow. We tend to measure whiskey in summers instead of years. You want the winter. It's not like things don't happen in the winter. The winter's great, but the summer is really where you're getting the extraction to understand how the distillate and the barrel are interacting together. And so having that first summer under our belt, I think we both feel like it's exceeding expectations. Now that said, that doesn't mean we're going to do a 3-year-old or, we probably will release something at 4 because we desperately need money. But the truth is, and this makes everyone uncomfortable except us, the whiskey's going to tell us. Like, we will know when it's peaked at a certain phase, right? And there are things you can do if you want to get to certain flavor profiles or age statements. But just as a standard 24,000 barrel rick house, Potter Jane Distilling in a 12-month season, char 3 barrel, like it's going to tell us when it's hitting its stride, right? We're not going to tell it. It will let us know.
You know, and I've always heard that, you know, summer is for extraction and winter is for it to sort of settle and amalgamate itself into a flavor. And, you know, I am not like a person who has a fantastic palate or, you know, knows a whole lot about, you know, whiskey tasting. I've drank a lot of whiskey, but that doesn't make me an expert. Unlike most podcast guys, like, oh, we know it. No, we don't know shit about it. But talking to people who do know about whiskey that have tasted your distillate that has aged for a little while, they're all, you know, kind of putting this, okay, this has been in a barrel for 5 months. When they tasted it, it tastes more like a year or, you know, 8 months or 9 months. They were in the kind of the same place that you guys are, that this feels way in advance. And you sort of answered the question, you know, there's a potential 4-year release because you need to make some money, but, how do you make money in the next 4 years, right? Because right now you can't completely operate off of debt. Are you guys doing contract distillation? Are you doing anything else?
Yeah, we are doing a little bit of contract distillation. We don't have many customers. But you know, we have people that have brands, and yeah, it helps pay the bills for sure. And we get to work directly with them. You know, these are brands that have wanted to like build their own mash bills and, you know, have us help them come to, you know, whatever that recipe will be that they think that they would like in 6, 7, or 8 years. And that's been a lot of fun in that they can, you know, utilize our distillery and our experience to make a whiskey and a profile that they see for their brands going forward. So we do some of that, definitely to pay the bills, and we really like all of them. And then, you know, the story, like the 4-year-old, what's interesting about us releasing something at 4, or 4.5, whatever it's going to be, you know, when you look at, I tell people this, like, you know, you look at these generational or these heritage distilleries, right? They all have a product at 4 to 5 years old that sells for less than $30 a bottle. That's what allows you to be generational, right? Because those brands, high quality, low price or lower price, are what sustain you, right? We see these ebbs and flows throughout the history of the industry, and those are kind of the anchors, and then gives them the right, like Jane talks about earning our weird. Well, those are things that you do so that you can go, and if we want our flagship to be 6, 7, or 8 years old, or we want to do some innovation or experimental stuff, you have to have something that is kind of your core that helps move volume, but also is affordable. I mean, we're all about, and it's what you'll see with us going forward, we're all about good whiskey for a good price. And I think you'll see that with what we release in that 4 to 5 year range.
And that may not be a permanent skew, and it might be. We're giving ourselves permission to not have all the answers.
Mm-hmm.
I think it would be ridiculous if we were like, here's the we have a 20-year master plan. But John, it's not gonna. If we hit that 20-year master plan, we fucked up big time. Like,
yes, some major shit fucked up. And
I mean,
circle back.
I mean, I think we're just, you know, making the best whiskey we can, being as honest as we can along the way, and we're gonna figure it out. And hopefully, there's people like you who give us the feedback, whether it's good or bad, when we need it, so that we can just keep adjusting and do the best job we can.
You know, in my day-to-day job, we build 5-year roadmaps with the intent of revisiting them every 12 months because we're never going to make it to the 5th year looking exactly like we did in the first year. You have to adjust to whatever's happening in the market for sure. You know, and that 4-year, $40 price point it's a knife fight, right? That's where most of the people are buying whiskey, right? Because whiskey nerds that watch this podcast, we're like, 5-10% of the market. The reality is bulk sales at that, you know, 4-year age statement where people are just buying a bottle of whiskey that they want to be good. And it's great to hear that kind of being at the center of the brand that you're building, because it's not a brand that's going to be built on, you know, LE releases or high age statements, because then you're at the whims of what time does to a spirit. You know, I think about the years that Buffalo Trace skipped one of their BTAC series because it wasn't quite ready and everybody lost their mind. If that's your whole brand, you're sort of fucked, right? Like you don't have anything to back up on, but building at a core of just good whiskey at a reasonable price, that's refreshing. And it's odd to say that is a refreshing take on building a brand because that should be a core tenet. And I know we're pushing up on time. I want to ask, is there a question that I haven't asked that I should have asked about what you guys have going on?
I think so. We're not going to be able to do like drive up tours for a long time, but we actually just had an open house with family, friends, mainly community here in Springfield. And we do want to start, offering up tours. And by tour, I mean drinking and playing skee ball with me and Denny. So that might not appeal to a lot of people, but that is something, there'll be inquiries on the website. We're getting ready to actually do something on the website. It's been a landing page for 2 years. These are the things we not hate, but we know they're necessary, but there aren't necessarily passion projects for us. But like hosting people here is something we love to do. Coming from a distillery like Makers, we would host 200,000 people a year. So we won't be there for a long time, but so if any of your listeners are interested in visiting, they can just Jane@PotterJane.com. Or Denny's email is 502.
Yeah,
I love late night texts.
My email is Jane@PotterJane.com.
That's curious how that works. And honestly, if a person's not interested in drinking and playing skee ball with you guys, what the hell are they even doing, right? This is supposed to be about fun.
Maybe not our demographic.
It's been so fun because, we have White Dog and 6-month-old, but we actually have brought some bottles from our collections at home. So it's been really fun just drinking whatever the hell we want the last 3 years without an agenda. It's just, we like this. You should taste it.
Yeah.
So,
and that's the way the best bottle shares happen is you bring something interesting from home and we all talk about it, right?
Yeah.
Because the whiskey is a communal spirit. It's not like vodka where you're looking for, speed shots or whatever. You really just want to sit down and have conversations with people. And I think at least if you continue the vibe you created at the Bourbon Festival with the brand building, you guys are there, right? You're already, you kind of know what it's going to take to build that community. I do want to thank you guys for hopping on and having the conversation with me. I know you're some time out from having something on the shelf to be able to make money, but I want to keep talking about what you guys are doing because I think that it's interesting. I think that it's refreshing, and I'm really interested to see what happens in the next couple of years. So Denny and Jane, thank you for giving me some time. You can't make more of it. And, you probably have things that you could be doing that would be more beneficial than talking to me. So thank you.
No way. This is awesome. Thank you.
Thanks for tuning into this episode from the Embellish Pod. If you enjoyed this, please leave me a review on whatever platform you're consuming this on. Leave a comment if at all possible. Hit me up on social media on TikTok or Instagram using Embellish Pod, and you can give me a follow so you can keep up what's going on here. I can be found at www.embellishpod.com with all of my links, accounts, contact details, and more. Thanks for stopping by.